So great ideas are coming into the chat box. Thank you so much for sharing. Sandra will be in there helping facilitate that discussion, but we appreciate everyone sharing your ideas. Some great ideas going through there. I'm going to go ahead and go on to our content portion of our webinar. So we wanted to take some time to think about how this skill of connecting to prior knowledge is related to learning and why it's important. So this information was taken from How Students Learn Science in the Inquiry and the National Science Education Standards. So first, understanding science is more important than knowing facts. For learners to use their knowledge outside a science class or test, it needs to be organized around a conceptual framework that helps them know the context in which the knowledge applies. Knowing science isn't just about facts and concepts. Students need to learn strategies for scientific thinking and problem solving. These science abilities are just as important to learners as science facts. Next, learners build new knowledge on what they already know. Children come to our program with conceptions about the world around them and how it works. These conceptions influence their learning, particularly their conceptual frameworks. It is important to understand their conceptions and misconceptions, especially when introducing new ideas or experiences. Learners also form new knowledge by modifying, refining, and adding to what they already know. Misconceptions can be changed. In fact, they are most likely to change when students have experiences that contradict their misconceptions and opportunities to develop their own explanations for what is happening, rather than being told what is happening by the adult. Learning is also social. So youth tend to learn better when they can discuss these concepts with their peers and also collaborate in learning that information together. So they can collaborate with their peers to make those connections and form those explanations. And effective learning also requires learners to take control. So we want youth to be guiding the learning, developing the questions that they're going to answer and the ways that they're going to answer those questions as they're going through that inquiry process. And finally, the ability to transfer learning to new situations is affected by the depth of understanding. So I think as adults we can really relate to this point as we don't exactly know what to do in every work situation or every situation that comes up. So what do? We rely on our past experiences and our knowledge. So our depth of understanding of any concept or situation or a science experiment is going to then transfer to new situations as we come upon them. So now we want you to take out your copy of the Doe Creatures activity or download it from the Files to Download pod in the upper right-hand corner. And to help set the stage for our discussion, we're going to see another video about the activity. Then we'll talk about strategies you can use to help youth connect to their prior knowledge as they create Doe creatures and learn about circuits. As we watch the video, think about what makes the learning relevant for youth. We'll use some discussion pods to share your ideas after the video. So we'll have some separate discussion pods that we'll pull out and then we'll all share those ideas. So just to give you a preview, those topics are what makes this activity relevant to the youth in the video? Do the connections come from the activity itself or how it is led by the staff? And then why is it important to connect to prior knowledge? And what would you do to make this activity relevant to the youth in your program? So just pay attention to the video now and soak it all in, and then we'll pull up those discussion pods so that you can share your thoughts after you view the video.
What we're going to do is experiment with Play-Doh, but it's special Play-Doh. Some of the Play-Doh conducts electricity, some of the Play-Doh insulates or what? Stops it. We're going to figure out how, and we're going to light some things up. Now,
watch this activity where youth are given the challenge of creating a simple circuit to light a bulb. What materials would you need to recreate this activity? What are the challenges for youth?
Your first picture, connect your battery box and your wires and dough like that. Well, now, let's think first. What do we need to do with our battery box?
Put the
Put the
batteries in.
batteries in. So put your batteries in.
I've done batteries before. It's super easy. This side goes right there. That side goes right there.
Why didn't it light up?
Battery thing we're touching that, and that needs to electrify. That's what the light on.
Oh, I heard something over here because there's what?
Because ours isn't all two lumps.
They're not in two lumps. She thinks that if we take it into two lumps, if we go to step 2, it will work. Let's try it.
Switch it around.
Are your balls touching?
Try it the other way.
Because we have to draw the
You
circuit.
have to put
Okay.
try it the other way. You gotta like.
Okay, now are they touching? So you might want to put some insulation in there. Okay. Got your motor working?
Maybe if we twist it. I think we made a light.
You got a light. All right.
All right, so as we pull up those discussion pods, I'll kind of explain what we are doing. So they'll have those questions typed into them. So the first one, what makes this activity relevant to the youth in the video? And then do the connections come from the activity itself, or how was it led by the staff? Why is it important to connect to prior knowledge? And what would you do to make this activity relevant to the youth in your program? Those are all topics that we want everyone to share their ideas on in those discussion pods that are coming up on your screens. So the concept behind this is similar to an idea walk, and I don't know if any of you have ever done an idea walk with your staff, but if you see, there's an idea walk PDF in the files to download, and that is our Click to Science resource that we're basing this activity on. So we want in an in-person or even a virtual professional development session, we would ask people to share their ideas, and then we come back together and talk about what you saw in those responses. So what did you notice that was different? You know, what opened your eyes about what this one person said, or what kind of new strategies or ideas did you get from this? So that's the concept that we're using here with these discussion pods, is everyone's having an opportunity to share what they saw and what they think as far as why it's important to connect to prior knowledge, and then some strategies that they would use to make this activity relevant to the youth in the program. So we're using, once again, the Dough Creatures activity. And so just be thinking about that as you're responding to these questions, and I will give you a little time where I'm not talking for you to think about those questions and type in your responses, and then we'll come back together as a group and kind of share our observations in the chat pod. So now that everyone's had a chance to think about those questions and share their ideas on the different kind of breakout pods that we have there on the screen, we want you to take some time to look over the ideas that everyone shared and see what we can learn from each other. So now we're going to go back to the primary chat pod on the right to share your observations as you look at what others have shared in the discussion boards. So think about what do you notice when you look over everyone's responses, you know, what similarities, what differences do you see, and then also take note of what ideas you can take from these discussion boards to use in your work. So take some time to do that now and then share your thoughts there in the chat pod, and I'll pop back on and share some ideas from that as well. All right, so as you share kind of your takeaways here, I'll share what I took away from this discussion. So I thought the what makes this activity relevant discussion board had some really great thoughts on it about how, you know, circuits are used every day in our lives, and what better way to connect that to youth than, you know, with a light switch. You turn the lights on when you come into a room, so using that as kind of your springboard for talking about why that works on the electricity, and really helping them, you know, learn how that process works. So that was great. I did notice a lot of people had, you know, similar responses in the connections come from the activity itself. or how it's led portion, but they emphasize that it's both important that youth are making those connections and then also that there's a staff person there to facilitate that as well. So ideas can come from the staff person facilitating the activity or the volunteer who's leading that, as well as youth making connections and suggestions as well. So as anyone else wants to share, please do so in the chat box. Otherwise, I am going to move on to some more content as part of the webinar. So we have some ideas that we wanted you to take away from this discussion. And these are actually provided by SciGirls. So we're going to recap some of that information as well. So there's a SciGirl 7 print PDF up in the files pod that's going to summarize some of this as well and where we took this information from. So SciGirls, which is a PBS program, has research strategies specifically for engaging girls in STEM, but research shows these strategies work for all learners. Everyone benefits from a gender equitable approach to STEM learning. So the ways that they suggest making STEM even more relevant is to look for ways to connect to learners' lives, where they live, what they do every day. So learners are motivated when they can find projects personally relevant and meaningful, and you can support them in using STEM to explore issues or topics that they care about. So what better way to give youth control in your programs and also make it relevant to their lives than having them submit their ideas for what they want to do, what they want to experiment on, what they want to research. Their second suggestion is to demonstrate your own enthusiasm for the activity. It is contagious. So your students will benefit from having a role model that enjoys STEM learning, even if you are not an expert. And I think that's so important to emphasize that you may not be the expert. You may not have the content knowledge that a science teacher has or that an expert in this field has. However, you're excited about it and you're learning right along with them. So remember to keep that excitement and to let them know that it's okay that we don't always have the answers, that we can find them together, and that's part of the fun of doing some STEM activities. So their third suggestion is to create a need to know. Think ahead. Why would they need to know this? Don't be afraid to ask your students about what they already know about a topic. Asking what they know and want to know can help you make connections or even adapt the activity to be more challenging and fun. And their fourth suggestion, when learners make connections, follow up and help them think more deeply about what they know and what they are unsure about. So use prompts that focus their attention on ideas or assumptions embedded in their first response. Help them think more deeply. So we would call these like a clarifying or a prompting question where we would help them think a little bit more about what their response was and clarify that for us. So what did you mean by this? Or you said this. Can you explain why you think that way? So just getting them to think a little bit more deeply about that by using some questions and following up when they do make those connections. So now that we are in the month of January, we're almost all of the way through by now, but we know this is the time of year for New Year's resolutions, and we wanted to see what you could resolve to change to help make connections to prior knowledge in 2016. So share in the chat pod what is one change you can resolve to make to help youth connect to prior knowledge in 2016. So kind of your connections New Year's resolution. And I'll give you just a minute to think about that and to type it into the chat pod. There are some great resolutions in the chat pod. So I'm just going to touch on a couple because they're scrolling up and we have people still typing. So I thought Laura Jones's to remember to review vocabulary, not in a teachy way, and have it written down for the girls to see as they do the activity is a great idea to help them make those connections. And then Sheila shared to start lessons by asking kids to think about what they already know instead of jumping into instruction. And Alex shared need to think more about what I already know. So also think about what you know and how you make connections. So I'll share with you my resolution, and mine is to let youth take the lead so that they can make it relevant for themselves. So give them the option to do some activities based around what they want to know and what they're interested in, and help them make those connections to what's going on in their everyday lives. So thank you so much for sharing. Continue to share those ideas in the chat pod. And I will go ahead and wrap up today's webinar with some information for you. So we want to thank you for participating today and for struggling through the issues with registration and some sound issues that we had at the beginning of the webinar. We really appreciate your patience, and thank you so much for, going through that with us and still staying on for the webinar. So we appreciate that so much and are so thankful that you're here with us today. We will post a recording of this webinar on the website under our on-demand webinars, so you can share it with colleagues who weren't able to join us today, or if you got in late because of the issues with registering and everything, you can watch what you didn't get to see through that link as well. So if one of your New Year's resolutions is to be more active in your own professional development, we have some strategies to share with you for the new year. So we have self-directed online lessons available through Penn State's Better Kid Care. And if you go to the Click to Science website, there are links everywhere on every one of the skills and on the front page for you to get to that website if you are interested in doing some online self-directed learning on your own. Our next webinar Wednesday is February 17th, and the topic is engaging with engineering in honor of Engineering Week. So please mark that on your calendar and join us for that. And we will have the Adobe Connect registration issue hopefully resolved by then. So we will hopefully have everything ready to go, and you can just join us for that webinar. We also want you to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest to get lots of ideas about making STEM click. And if you are not already registered for Click to Science, please go ahead and register for full access to the site and to get our monthly update of ideas and resources for STEM, as well as access to all of the professional development resources, our blogs, and those on-demand webinars. So we want to thank you so much for joining us today. It looks like I breezed over the date for Shauna. So it is February 17th is our next webinar Wednesday, and the topic is engaging with engineering. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.